it takes integration. And integration means that you're taking various components of things that create you, how you show up. And there's only one person like you, right? It's also dynamic. So when you know better, you do better. You don't just show up one day and you're like, I'm authentic. It doesn't work like that. It takes a lot of reflection, and it takes a lot of assessment to see what works, what doesn't work.
What's going on, guys? It's your Javi David St. Clair Speaks, and you are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
Welcome back to the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. I'm your host, Javi St. Clair, sitting down with another awesome guest. Today's guest is Nicole Edwards, speaker, author, founder and CEO of Edwards Authentic. She's also the co-author of Women of Color Who Boss Up, and I'm all for women of color bossing up. So with that being said, Nicole, I want to welcome you onto the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. Please give our listeners a 3 to 5 minute introduction on yourself, your brand, your business, and the inspiration behind writing the book.
Thank you so much for having me. That's such a warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here with you, Javi. So my name's Nicole Edwards. I am, as he said, a speaker, and I also had an opportunity to co-author this book. Women Who Boss Up is a collection of stories of 16 women of color from all over the world who have literally overcome every obstacle you may have heard of and may have not heard of in order to pursue their business goals. And it's just an honor to be a part of this project. And, just coming together as women of color is so important. So often our stories are left untold, and, it takes a lot to boss up. So I have copies of that available, and we can hopefully link that in the show notes. If anyone if you know a woman who'd like to boss up, this is a great resource for her. As far as my why, I am in it because of people like me, right? So I am a woman of color. I am a mother, and I have teenagers. So for all of y'all who have teenagers right now, my heart goes out to you. And so it's all about pursuing your dreams. So often we hear about, you just have to follow your passion. You have the one passion, follow it. But often we don't get told how to do that. And we also get a glamorized version, when you scroll on your Insta or even LinkedIn sometimes, you get this glamorous portrayal of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And so I'm in the game to, one, follow what I feel is my purpose, is to empower women of color to boss up, but also to shed a light on what it really takes. And, it might not be like a one-stop shop. It takes years and years to put yourself out there. And so that's what I'm all about.
Let's dive right into it, because one of the first things I want to talk about is, I like to say catch me up, right? How did we get to this point? How did we become Edwards Authentic? How did you boss up? At what point did you pivot? And what was that like for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When so let me rewind. My background is in talent development. And what talent development is, for those people who might not know, it's kind of an umbrella term that has to do with training and development, coaching, performance improvement. It has all of these facets, right? So it's not quite HR, and it's not quite learning and development, but it's kind of taking a holistic view for people and to help them with their personal professional goals. So for many, many, many years, I've worked with a company that I have been allowed to, create projects and facilitate trainings and doing all of that. And that was my background. It was my passion. And the more I would do it, the better that I got at it. And the company is an amazing company, but it wasn't targeting the people that I thought needed it the most. So often when you hear of programs out there that are either coaching or even training workshops, sometimes they can be thousands and thousands of dollars, and you don't have access to them. So, my goal was to take all what I've learned, and my focus was always leadership development. I was always in the leadership development space, and specifically cultivating leaders to honor who they are and what they bring to the table. And when you do that, right, you show up authentically. versus here are the 5 traits that you need to be a substantial standout leader, right? What do you have inside of you that you can strengthen and make work together or integrate so that you can show up your best in your 9 to 5 and in your side hustle and your entrepreneurial journey. So I took all of that, and it took me, many, many years to think, okay, how can I pivot and how can I bring this to the audience that I want to? And so it took a lot of digging, and it took a lot of courage to finally start my own business. And that was the birth of Edwards Authentic. It was right before the pandemic. As we all know, kind of threw a monkey wrench into everything, is when I finally launched it and dedicated myself to not only do speaking engagements, but workshops and offer courses and mentorship opportunities for people like me.
Okay, I am really excited about this. So I want to swing back to something that you said, right? The authentic, being authentic. What does, because I know with leadership, there are challenges that come with leadership, right?
Yes.
What does being authentic in leadership look like in the corporate setting?
Sure. So first, it's not just about knowing yourself. That's part of it. You have to dig deep and to know how your personal traits show up, right? So we are familiar with the DISC and Myers-Briggs and other kind of leadership assessments that help you to cultivate your style. But it's not only that. It's the way that you interact with people, right? Your emotional intelligence. It's your interests, right? What do you do on the weekend? What are some lessons there that you can pull into your message when you're in a leadership space? So when you're leading from an authentic space, it takes integration. And integration means that you're taking various components of things that create you, how you show up. And there's only one person like you, right? It's also dynamic. So when you know better, you do better. You don't just show up one day and you're like, I'm authentic. It doesn't work like that. It takes a lot of reflection, and it takes a lot of assessment to see what works, what doesn't work. Now, a lot of people ask me, okay, that sounds great, Nicole. I want to infuse this authentic leadership kind of component in my style, but my situation or surrounding doesn't allow me to do so. And although we are challenged with different settings, I beg to differ that you can indeed infuse aspects, exactly what I'm talking about, that helps you to show up more authentically, because people know when you are putting on a facade and when they're not. And quite honestly, you're not putting out, your unique signature, and it speaks to others when you do so. When you show up in your skin as you are, people are inspired to do the same.
And it's an interesting point because it, as you said, it shows in everything that you do, right? You, after a while, you really can't hide it, right? If you lied on that job application and you're 3 to 4 months in, right, it's going to show, right? And we talk about being authentic, it's going to show. So it definitely starts from day one. So I want to talk to you about the personal development and that professional development, getting to the point of leadership, Nicole, because again, you're a woman who's bossed up, and I understand that it has been a journey, right? So what has that journey been like from the personal and the professional development side? Because there is a lot that you had to shed, right? That you couldn't take with you, right? So what was that process like? And you mentioned this a little early, that you can't just show up one day and say, hey, I'm authentic, right? I have it all together. So what was that process like for you, and what have been some teachable moments on that journey?
Okay, so some things that come to my mind. So I come from a background, I'm a cusper X-Gener, but I really relate to the X-Gen, right? And in the corporate space, I'm in it because I want to make my boss look good. I say yes to everything, right? I want to go 150%, into the game, and I want to smile while I'm doing it, right? So what has happened to me over the time is to know that you're not listening to yourself, right? You're neglecting yourself and maybe your own needs for the sake of others, right? And this is just one example. I'm sure other people can relate to that, and not just an X-Gener. I'm just using that as a frame. And so I think the first thing was for me to understand my personal style, right? So I am one that likes, I like to work amongst people that I can creatively work with, that I love, that I show affection for, where that might not work in every setting, right? And in fact, some people want you to tell them, I want you to do X, Y, Z, subpoint 1, 2, 3, and lay it all out. And that's what it is. We're here to work, right? And so it took me many years to acknowledge, first of all, I'm not a certain type of leader. I am not the classic, for anybody who knows Myers-Briggs, ESTJ. It means extroversion, right? You're an extroverted, seal the deal quickly and as fast as you can. You make decisions logically, right? And you work in a sequential manner, right? That is the archetype of what a CEO looks like in this country. And I was the opposite of that. So what I'm saying that to say is that part of this collaboration and being on a team and really being creative and mentoring and being together with people when you want to do something is very different than the other thing that I'm suggesting. So for me, I had to little by little show, right? I had to be in my workspace and show how that was effective and how, in fact, it was exceeding goals. And which sucks because you should be able to just be who you are and be accepted. But a lot of times people don't know things and they don't know what's going to work until you can show them and speak their language. You have to speak others, right? You have to seek to understand before you ask to be understood. And I think that was a pivotal point. Once I got secure in my leadership style, I ran with it. And I knew that this was, the way that I wanted to lead. And I hear of stories over the years and the women that I've worked with who are stuck, right? They're stuck in the ESTJ Myers-Briggs, prototype of leadership, and they feel that they cannot bring any other facets to their expression in their leadership style.
As you're talking, I'm like, man, I could just tell, like, you could be my manager, right? Like, there is just some people where it's like you have this, like, there's this leadership aura, right? Where it's like this person speaking, we're listening, like full divided attention. Okay, you need me to, make X amount of calls. Cool, I'll do it. But it's also the relatable. I think, as a leader, making yourself relatable, but also approachable,
yes.
Right? I think for me, I got some stories about, leaders that weren't as approachable versus the leaders who were. And It's the leaders that I found to be more approachable were the leaders that I went the extra mile for, because I'm like, you know what? I got to do what I have to do. Yes. I know they have my best interest in the heart. They want me to make money. I want to make money. They want to make money. We want the same thing, but it's that communication that gets dropped off. So I want to talk to you about what I just mentioned, being approachable as a leader, and how communication ties to that. Because going back to the point I mentioned earlier, I don't want to be 3 months in, 4 months in Nicole, I just don't get it, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to do these sit downs all the time. If I just don't get it, I need to communicate that with you.
Yeah. I think you hit it on the nail. There's this idea of being approachable, but especially for women, and I would say women of color, we have a different frame that we're working from, and we are working against the grain, right? We have to work 200% harder than almost anyone else, right? So this idea of being approachable might now veer into, okay, if I'm too nice, then I'm not going to be taken seriously. I'm not going to be credible, right? And I just need to own my space. So it's like this dance that you have to figure out, which, if I could completely crack the code, I would be, rich and living somewhere, on a boat. But I think we get little things, right? And we get closer and closer and closer. So I think the human part is what connects people no matter what business you're in, whether it's in this professional setting, whether it's an entrepreneur, right? There's so many times where I have connected with the heart of a person and landed a gig versus me pitching, my accolades and what I can do and whatever. If we can find that space, I do believe that it's transformational. That's just where I sit.
And it's a very interesting point, because when I'm just thinking of my professional experience of leaders that I had in the past that were women of color, and I've only had one, right? As a certified personal trainer for 9 years, only had one woman of color in leadership.
Wow.
And looking back, man, she challenged me, right? But in the beginning stages, I absolutely hated it. But looking back, like towards the end when she was getting transferred, it's like when we gelled, and I'm like, I see what you were doing for me. And it was just like one of those, like, man, but we encounter people like that, right? We encounter people, in the beginning stages, they challenge you because they see something in you. So I want to talk about your experience in corporate, some success stories, some horror stories. What have been some teachable moments in that setting for you working in corporate?
So I actually, if it's okay with you, some things come to mind. I'm also a professor. I'm an adjunct professor. And I feel like, I've seen that in that space, like some examples come up to my mind as far as being challenged and being the challenger, right? When I have, so my students are typically in their 20s. Some are coming back to school, but the majority of them, I would say, come in their 20s. And I would say in the teaching space, that is when I definitely, as a leader, will push, because it is so essential as an emerging leader to get those lessons in early, right? There's nothing worse than years go by and I had an opportunity, right? As you're saying, she pushed you, right? And I'm sure you can see now, okay, if I hadn't gone through that, I might not have been X, or I might not have been in this specific predicament. It is my essential duty to push at that point. In the corporate space, quite honestly, the majority of my time has been in the nonprofit sector. We work a little bit differently, some of the same dynamics, but the bottom lines are different. So it has its own kind of nuances and issues in that particular thing. But what I'm saying is that I really see it as an essential piece to push young people, whether it's young men or young women, to rise to the level that they need to be so that they can be successful. And I mean, this last semester, I had a student that pushed. He pushed back, and I pushed him to think. And I didn't think I was getting through until the very end. And he sent me a message. He's like, okay, I see now.
I want to ask you this. How has your personal experiences helped you find a successful niche in business?
Oh, so much. The first thing that comes to mind, I'm a mixed race person. And from an early age, I had this thing with my identity, really trying to understand what are the facets of my being, what side do I belong to, until it, finally over many different years and different encounters and trying on new things, I have come to the place where I'm fully integrated and I honor both sides of myself, right? That has been one of the key pieces in my thought leadership message, what I speak about when I talk about integration and I talk about using the different facets of yourself, some known, some unknown, some to be known, and how that can help you and point you to what you're supposed to be doing. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is I have a child with autism who's now a teenager, and the journey that it took me to, get him to where he's able to fly on his own has been a change of course, right? You have kids and you think, okay, this is going to be, people say it's hard, but okay, I got this. And when you are, it's laid in your lap, it's not going to be exactly the way you thought it would. You get resourceful, you dig in, you learn, you read, you just turn into a master of investigation and application. And that has also helped me to infuse not only my interests, but the message that I share, with the women that I work with, but also to my audiences. Typically, I speak to audiences who are these emerging leaders and who are trying to figure it all out. Where do I fit in? How do I approach my leadership role? And then also, in this notion of people really trying to start businesses, right? There's been an explosion of people, not only entrepreneurs, but people trying to establish side hustles. And that can also point you to where you need to be. So for my life, those two things have really contributed to where I am and how I think and look at the world.
All right, Nicole, I want to ask you, man, I don't want to lose my train of thought. I want to swing back. I think there was something that I mentioned before, I believe with communication. So I want to ask you about, you being a professional speaker.
Mm-hmm.
The first things first is I want to know, like, how did you find, because you mentioned, you felt like you was getting tugged in terms of identity, right?
Yes.
How did you find confidence in your power voice and telling your story? Because I'm pretty sure you didn't sit in silence and leadership just fell in your lap, right? You had to speak up. So how did you get to that point and how did you find it?
So finding my voice as a speaker or before?
I would say, yeah, I would probably say finding your voice as a speaker, but also finding your confidence in telling the world who you are.
It didn't happen overnight, let me tell you. And there's stages that we go through. I teach a framework called the TRUE framework, which talks about the different stages that one goes through in order to integrate various aspects. So I'll tell you that at first, you don't know it. You don't know what you don't know until it hits you in the face one day, right? And awareness is the first step in order to change anything. I think when I was a child and as I was growing up, I didn't really realize that there was anything special or unique or whatever. Like I just was going along until one day, there was an encounter. There was something that happened that smacked you wide awake, and you realized, oh, I'm different, right? And that happened for me probably in my tween years. I went to the doctor, with my mother who was white. And the doctor, right in front of me was doing the intake. And she looked at my mom and said, actually, it was a man, and looked at my mom and said, she's adopted, right? And I remember like it was like a movie, like the screech, like the looking around like, what? And it was from that moment I realized I was biracial, right? To me, it would just seem like I was a human person. There was nothing to it. But then I started to see that people it's almost like my eyes were opened and I realized, oh my gosh, there is something to this. So the stages that I went through was exploration, right? You dig in. Sometimes you deny the other side. Sometimes you go full force into one, right? So what I'm saying is that it didn't happen overnight. It came by trial and error. It came by going through these stages. First, something hit me. It was an awareness piece. Next, I tried on different things, right? I tried this, I tried that. I asked questions, I dug in, I reflected, right? And then eventually you get to the point, little by little, you start to do the integration process and you decide, you know what? This is me. A big help is to identify others who have gone through similar journeys and connect with them and ask them how they've handled it, right? That's why Women Who Boss Up is so important. In my experience, the one thing that women of color will say, how did they get to where they were? What impacted their journey the most is being around other women of color doing the same thing. We have to do it in community. We don't do it isolated. So I think there in itself gave me confidence to be able to more and more and more, honor the voice, what feels completely authentic for me, and to speak it out loud.
Man, that is very interesting because that is I hear that a lot with anyone that's biracial, and they speak on that as far as just like really identifying what their identity is, right? What side do they lean in more? It's interesting because my daughter's biracial, right? So it's like I look at this kid and I'm like, man, like it's like I'm thinking of this conversation now. Like, man, like it's unfortunate, but you go through that, right? So understanding that, hey, this is gonna happen, this is part of it. I want to talk to you about man, there's two questions I want to ask. And this is why I like going off the record because it feels more, as we say, authentic, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the part of speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are 3 tips to being a successful speaker? Because, you know, there's so many different avenues. There's so many different types of speakers. And
Yes.
for someone that overthinks, you could get pulled from different directions. So what are 3 tips to being a successful speaker?
So the first tip is you have to have a story, right? For so many years, I would speak as an expert and I would just, tell the audience, about what I know and what they should know, right? It was until a couple of years ago, shout out to Carol Cox of Speaking Your Brand. She has a wonderful program where you really tap into what is your personal story, right? The personal story is what transforms your speaking. So I would absolutely say that a person needs to have that. Now, I always thought you have to have something, over the top dramatic, right? There's a speaker that I really admire, forgot her name, but she's like, I don't know, like super high ranking in like the military and has done like these amazing things, or people that have, I saw another speaker that jumped out of a plane. I would never jump out of a plane, and has this amazing story like behind it, right? I always thought that it had to be bigger than life, but that's not the truth. As long as it's authentic and it's meaningful to you and you can draw out what you learned from it, any audience can learn from that, right? Because they're making sense of it in their mind, not yours, right? So the first thing I would say, you have a compelling personal story that doesn't have to be like you saved the world, but something that is meaningful first, right? The second thing, you have to have takeaway. If it's at least one good takeaway, therein lies your job. So many times speakers speak just on their story, right? But there's no real like, okay, how does this relate again? And how am I supposed to apply this, right? You have to apply or give the audience a takeaway that makes or breaks, right? And the third one is a little controversial, but I have to say it. People have to fine tune their craft. Everyone thinks that they're a speaker, right? And yes, we can all speak, but speaking is it's an art and a science, and it takes a long time to master the discipline of it, right? So everything from, taking out your filler words to the way you stand in front of an audience, the way that you use your body gestures, your vocal variety. You really you don't have to be perfect, but you have to pay attention to those things. And you have to address the things that may not make you as powerful as you can. When you have a speaker, I'm sure you've seen many speakers. And so when you see a speaker and they say, yeah, and so, and right. And I might be doing that here. I'm on an interview. That's a little different. I just did it, right? Or if they're rocking, like, you ever been to a speaker and the speaker's like doing this, right? It's stuff like that subconsciously is telling people that you don't know what you're talking about.
How do you find balance within motherhood?
Juggling all of the roles and responsibility, which I have many. It's just prioritizing and making it work for you. I am not the type that makes a schedule and follows it to the T. Sometimes I am driven by inspiration and I need to maximize on my inspiration, right? Sometimes I have to do something unexpected because it's not in my plan in order to make it work. That might not work for other people with different type of preferences. But for me, it works like that. You hear this all the time. The self-care matters. And self-care to me means your toolbox of things that work for you, right? So for me, green juice, it sounds so crazy, but drinking green juice gives me sometimes what I need in that moment in order to execute what I need to do for the day. I take a walk around my block. If I am to here and I'm feeling either negative or anything like that, I take a 20-minute walk, right? I do that. And you hear this over and over again, I'm sure, from other people, but it really does work. It really does work if you fine tune what the self-care is for you. So balance, I don't know if it's exactly balance, but it's making what all of your roles and responsibilities work together. And it's about doing it in a way that makes sense for you, right? I am not a morning person. So I am not the CEO that's waking up at 4:00 in the morning to start their morning routine. It's just not the way that I do it, right? I start a little later and I still take my time to prepare myself, whether that's using my meditation app or things like that. And then I tend to stay up a little later than the average person. So I think it's just finding a system that works for you. At least that's what I do.
Right. I want to swing back to women of color who boss up. What would you say is the number one takeaway message that you want readers when they're reading this book? Like, what is the takeaway message? Because I understand that you co-authored and you collaborated, so there's a lot of story there, right? So in terms of takeaway messages, I'm sure there's so many different takeaways, but from your point of view, what would you want the readers to take away from just reading the book as a whole?
Don't give up. That's it. Don't give up. If you have something that's been put on your heart to do, don't give up, right? I'm going to show you the book real quick. This is the book. The stories in here they cross personal and professional. So there's some women in here that have gone through, things that just, it would floor anyone, right? And they have managed to build back and still pursue their dreams. In addition to don't give up, it's just that it doesn't have to happen in one, movie style dramatic, scene. And then now, boom, you have it. It's the little by little by little by little. That's how you achieve it. It's the don't give up in the little things, right? Because you can do it. You can do it, and you can do it with community. I think that's the, a key thing. We came together to write this book, and we do it together, right? We all have to support, because I feel like that is the could be a missing piece in someone who might be struggling, who doesn't know where to turn, or it's to get that support that you need in order to move forward towards that goal.
What would you want, like listeners and anyone watching this now, there's so many good talking points today, but what is the main, I guess, like, what is your intentions on being the show, but what is the importance behind your story? Like, why is your story so important? I'm playing devil's advocate, of course. But why is your story so important, Nicole? Just as a whole, not just with the book, but you being on the show today, you doing all these speaking engagements, TEDx speaker as well. Like, why is all of this so important to you?
Because I feel like so many people don't truly tap into all of the jewels that they have inside, right? The integration process happens when you understand what are the pieces of yourself that you're not tapping into, right? That can help you to show up differently and more authentically in your leadership, entrepreneurial, side hustle space. I think that's the key message that I want to get, is that don't lose out, right, on the things that you could have right in front of you because you are trying to aspire to do something like someone else, or copy a certain other person's way of doing something. We all have something to bring to the world, right? And we all have an authentic print. And I know people have heard that before, but it's so true, right? There's no one you. And so my job is to help others to really tap into that space, to really understand, okay, what could I be missing here that I can apply, in my goals in order to show up more authentically and therefore be more effective, for myself, but for the world, for everybody else, for who you're around. It's so important. If we all did that, wow.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone the other day. I believe I was actually talking to someone I interviewed yesterday, and she's a woman of color, of course. But I was telling her, I'm like, yo, I don't get enough Black women on my show. Like, I don't know what that's about, but I don't get. So it's like when I had the opportunity to get you on the show, Nicole, and I seen all the stuff that you do, I'm like, oh, and Woman Who Boss Up, like that's the perfect title, right? So I'm like, yeah, I have to have you on the show because for me, it's all about representation. So to see a woman that's so passionate, especially a woman of color, that's so passionate about leadership development, right? Being a voice, helping people find their voice in the same breath. And also that next generation too, because there is going to be another generation of younger women that are coming up, and they could use this book as a blueprint, right? Of, mistakes to avoid, things that you need to apply when it comes to professionalism, right? So again, like there's just so many hidden gems. Like being a girl dad, like that's the things I think about, right? So it's like as a girl, like full time, like that's all I'm thinking about. So for me, I have to be on Front Street with supporting women in business and of course women empowerment, because I got a daughter. So I want her to, when it's all said and done, kind of like go back, listen to this, watch this, because it's all going to be monetized. And once it's out there, we live in an era now where once this is out there, it's out there, right? Like this could be a blog, it could be on YouTube, et cetera, but it's out there. So that's what makes me so passionate about listening to stories, right? Because your struggles weren't my struggles weren't your struggles, but here we are, we're connected because of story. And that's what just makes me so passionate, because I hear, like, I'm a man, of course, but like when I hear about some of the things that women have went through in business, in corporate, in entrepreneurship, it does get like it. I have little sisters too. So for me, it gets very frustrating, right? It gets frustrating hearing it, but I'm not dealing with that every day, right? So I just want to make sure for me, I show up, I support the cause, I support the message, and I understand, the power of the movement. And if I don't, I try to understand, right? So I ask questions and I invite guests like you on the show because I want to know what else can we do? And I guess this is a good question for you, right? What can others do that, like what can men do to support women who want to boss up? Like, what does that support look like for someone who's not a woman?
I think of people like you, right? You are using your platform to share stories of what people are doing, right? I think what men can do is this, what you're doing. It's if they have an opportunity, they can bring in a woman of color and put them, give them the connections, introduce them, be that connector. I think that goes leaps and bounds, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know sometimes. And I think that is a critical piece. Also, advocating and supporting if something does not go as expected, right? We do face situations where people are discriminatory or dismissive, just don't take us seriously, or think, oh, that's that women's movement stuff, over here, right? Being an advocate, using your voice, using your platform such as you, like that's incredible to me. So thank you for doing that.
No, I'm all for it. I can't, I'm definitely all for the cause. But again, I just like the fact that with women versus men, like women just come together so naturally, and it's just like boom, right? There's no egos. With men, if I got a group of my guy friends to co-author on a book, come on, bro, we're not. Oh, nah, bro, we're gonna, it's this and that. It's a lot of tugging, right? So I like the fact of community, and I guess this is what I want to talk to you about. And I'm seeing this from the outside looking in. How important has community been for you in your journey in your personal and your professional life?
I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you without it. It has been the key component, I think, of all of my success. I cannot name one thing that I have accomplished that I didn't have the backing of a woman supporter, or I didn't have a community of women cheering me on. Hands down. It is, even from my circle of girlfriends, I have the best circle of girlfriends, right? And for those people that do have a good girlfriend group, you know what I'm talking about, right? For your listeners. There's nothing quite like that, where you support each other, and as you do bigger and better things, they are the first people to read your article, share your article, talk about your speaking engagement, right? They've got you on blast because they are there cheering you on. But I have also found community of people that I didn't know. The Women of Boss Up community, absolutely phenomenal group of people that we still support each other, right? When we see each other doing things out there, and the incredible things that I have seen people do as a result of this book is just incredible. When I think about even my younger years and help with my son as my son was developing, I didn't do that without a community supporting me. I would not have done it. It almost moves me to tears when I talk about it, because I had a circle of women. When I was struggling, there was many years where I struggled because he had a lot of challenges, and I would take him to his school and they would take it from there and not make me feel a glimmer of any shame or guilt or anything, just like angels. And I attribute them to a lot of my son's success today. So I know I'm passionate about this, but I do believe that this is really so important. I'm so much so, I have to tell you this, I'm also pursuing a doctorate degree, and I'm almost at my dissertation stage. And I want to study communities that support women of color in their entrepreneur and leadership journeys.
And we talk about Edwards authentic. It doesn't get any more authentic than that. You feel that raw emotion right there? You feel that right there? That's what I'm talking about. Man, this was a lot of fun. Nicole, what would you say, this book being out now, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Where do you see the impact on not only just the book, but the book, your story, your community? Mm-hmm. Where do you see yourself and your tribe within the next 5 to 10 years? Because life is moving pretty fast, right? Yeah. And we are literally halfway through August.
Yes.
Where do you see your brand and your business within the next 5-10 years?
Okay, so speaking is my number one thing. So I'm in the process. My new website will be out next month. It will be Nicole Speaks Live. And that is kind of like the hub for all the things, right? I plan on facilitating a retreat for professional women of color this coming fall and in subsequent years, right? I live in Florida, as we were talking about, and I want people to be able to come to Florida and enjoy this weather, right? And also get some loving and some real just amazing support in their professional endeavors. So that's coming up for me. And who knows what other partnerships that I will, explore as I go. I know a lot of women are doing some similar things, and I always want to partner with people. I think, that comes across in me talking with you today. So those are the main things. I will also have a course that corresponds with my speaking for anybody who wants to get more in-depth information like that. But I want to further my own personal community and the communities that I'm connected with as we grow. This is where it's at for me.
Oh yeah, this is where it's at. All right, Nicole, please shout out your social media, your website now. Where can we follow you, keep up with you, and please shout out where can we get a copy of the book? Sure.
So edwardsauthentic.com is my website. It will be my website, even when I have the new website. On that page, there's a link of a shop that you can order a paperback copy of The Woman of Color Who Boss Up. You can also hit me up on Instagram. It's Edwards Authentic. Everything's the same. I'm also on LinkedIn. I do a lot of connecting on LinkedIn. It's Nicole Edwards, CPTD, which stands for Certified Professional in Talent Development. Nicole Edwards, CPTD on LinkedIn. And any of those ways, anyone can contact me.
This was a lot of fun. Nicole, I want to say thank you. I want to say, first things first, thank you for being on the show. That's one. But thank you for being you, because we definitely need more women of color on the front street, like really pushing the message, pushing the narrative, taking reins of leadership. We definitely need more women in leadership that are vocal, not just in the position, but in the position and vocal and advocating change. Like, I'm definitely for it. So with that being said, I want to thank you again for being on the show. For the listeners, however you're consuming this content, whether you're watching this or you're streaming this, greatly appreciated. Like I always say, what good is information if you don't apply it? Apply what you've learned today. There was a lot of hidden gems here. That being said, I will catch you in the next episode. This is the St. Clair Speak Show.